In 2002, a pair of battered old trucks drove through deep snow into a tiny Alaskan ghost town. They were carrying a large family that looked to be from another century. A man with his long, unruly beard introduced himself to one of the town's few residents as Papa Pilgrim. He told people that a shaft of light had brought him a religious awakening, and now God had whispered to him, telling him to move with his wife and family to Alaska. What Papa Pilgrim goes on to do to his family is absolutely despicable. Hello and welcome back to Crime, Mystery and Mayhem with Kate. If this is your first visit to my channel, hello, welcome. It is great to have you here. Here on my channel, I talk about true crime stories because I find them interesting, and I'm I'm quite intrigued as to why some people do the horrible things that they do. There are some terrible, terrible people out there. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel because it would really help me in my attempts to grow my channel. I cannot do this without your guys' support. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about Robert Allen Hale, aka Papa Pilgrim. Terrible, terrible person. He was a horrible man who treated his children and wife like complete shite. So let's jump into today's story. Before I do that, actually, warning, there's speak of incest, the R word, beating up of a toddler. So if you don't feel like you need to hear that today, feel free to click out, come back another time. All right, here we go. So Robert Allen Hale was the son of Virginia and I.B. Hale. He had a twin brother called Billy and a younger brother called Tommy. He grew up in Fort Worth, Texas, and he attended Arlington Heights High School. The strange story of Papa Pilgrim, it actually begins much earlier than his arrival into Alaska. So I'm going to be calling him Bobby throughout this video because that's what people called him. I'm not going to call him Papa Pilgrim because I don't want to be saying Papa Pilgrim all the time because it sounds stupid. But yes, I'm going to call him Bobby. So Bobby went by his legal name, Robert, when he was in high school. His dad was actually a college football star when he was younger, and he ended up turning down an offer to play for the Washington Redskins, and instead he joined the FBI. Interesting, right? So Bobby was known for his violent temper, and he really enjoyed fighting. Like, he liked to fight with his fists. He even trained to be a boxer. So yeah, there we go. At 17 years old, Bobby ended up running away with his 16-year-old high school sweetheart, Kathleen Connolly. They call her KK, so I'm going to call her KK. The daughter of future Texas Governor John Connolly. So I'm sure you guys have heard of him, maybe. John Connolly is perhaps best remembered for riding in the car with President John F. Kennedy in Dallas when Kennedy was assassinated. So, yeah. Bobby and KK eloped and they moved to Tallahassee, Florida, where she soon learned that she was pregnant. So Bobby and his new bride had a tumultuous relationship. And on Monday, April the 27th, 1959, following an explosive argument, KK spent the night with the landlady of their apartment building. She needed to get away from her man. Like, he was horrible to her. So the following morning, she went to the local police station and she asked them if she could be sent back to her parents in Texas. She just needed to go home. She needed to get away. But sadly, before the officers were able to help her, she returned to the apartment, and when police showed up, they actually found her. She was deceased. Yeah, that's like only a few hours after going to try and get help from the police, she was found deceased. The back of her head had been blown away by a 12-gauge shotgun. Really, really sad. And she was pregnant. According to Bobby, he arrived home and he found his wife laying on the sofa with a loaded shotgun. And apparently she was threatening to kill herself. He said that he tried to get her to put the gun down, but she refused. And he, lunged towards her to grab the weapon, but apparently it discharged. Her death was ruled accidental, despite the absence of her prints on the shotgun. So it's, in my opinion, it's pretty obvious what happened. When because I already know the story of this guy, so I'm thinking, he did it, but yeah. So after she died, Bobby returned to Fort Worth, where he received his GED, and he attended Texas Christian University for a short while. A few months later, the police caught Bobby and his twin brother breaking into the LA apartment of Judith Exner, the rumored mistress of JFK. No explanation has ever emerged to suggest why the brothers broke into her apartment. And not long after the break-in, the US government awarded one of the largest military contracts in the US history to IB Howe's new employer, General Dynamics. So it makes you think, what was going on? Some historians, they wonder if the brothers were trying to find evidence in Judith's apartment about her affair with Kennedy, so that maybe they could blackmail the president into awarding General Dynamics their defense contract. So it does look that way, right? What do you guys think? Bobby then headed to Houston and then back to California, where he ran with the same crowd that Charles Manson ran with. Yeah, so it kind of shows what kind of person he is, right? At age 33, at age 33, Bobby, now going by the name Bob Sunster, met 16-year-old Karina Rose Bressler near a waterfall in the San Bernardino Mountains. And he soon became obsessed with her. He thought she was great, and he called her his country Rose. Bobby and Rose found a job caretaking a ranch that was actually owned by actor Jack Nicholson in a remote section of northern New Mexico, and they stayed on this ranch for more than 20 years. They raised sheep and goats, and they grew their own vegetables. Rose gave birth to their first child, Butterfly Sunstar. They later renamed her to Elishaba in 1975, and every other year Rose gave birth to another child until they eventually had 15 children. Now that's a lot of kids. I thought I had a lot of kids, but that's a lot of kids. Bobby would experiment with various religions, but he finally settled on his unique, self-serving form of Christianity, so he made up his own religion. He changed his name. He started calling himself Papa Pilgrim, and was not shy about sharing his version of the gospel with anyone who would listen. The children, they never watched TV, and they had no access to computers. They received no formal education, and they were really naive about the ways of the world. Their dad was their educator. Only their oldest daughter and the oldest boys learned how to read. Bobby destroyed all the family books except the Bible and a copy of Pilgrim's Progress, and refused to teach the other children how to read or even how to perform simple maths, like 1 + 1, 2 + 2, that kind of thing. He's just not teaching his kids stuff that you need to be teaching your kids. He wanted them to know the scripture only through his teachings. He did not want them to read the Bible for themselves and then question his interpretation of it. So Bobby forced his children to haul his bath water every night. And then, because he's such a lovely man, he allowed them to take baths in his dirty, gross water maybe every 3 to 4 days. Like, that's disgusting. Why have these children if you can't take care of them, honestly? He would actually brag that his kids bathed in their undergarments and had never seen a naked body, including their own. I'm not sure how that is something to brag about, but okay. Bobby demanded total obedience from his wife and his children, and when he felt like they were disobeying him, he unleashed swift, brutal punishment. He was not afraid to hit his kids, and not just hit, but beat his kids. He would whip them with a leather strap or his belt, and he hit them with his fists. And remember, he was a trained boxer, so he would deliver some severe beatings. When Bobby and Rose had first moved to the New Mexico ranch, they lived miles from their nearest neighbors. But over time, people began moving closer to the strange backwoods couple whose children never seemed to go to school. So the place is building now. More people are coming in. Bobby actually taught his kids that it was okay to steal from their neighbors if they had something that they needed. And when the neighbors started to accuse him and his family of theft, and they actually wrote a letter, the neighbors did, to Jack Nicholson. They asked Jack Nicholson to evict the family from the ranch, and that's when Bobby was like, okay, enough is enough, and was time to hit the road and move his family to Alaska. Yeah, so they got out of there and they went to Alaska. Once in Alaska, he believed he could live in seclusion with his family, preach his gospel, and act as lord of his kingdom. He didn't seem to realize that conditions can be extreme in Alaska, and you often must depend on others to survive. So the family drifted around Alaska for a few years. They lived in Fairbanks and Homer for a short time, but neither town offered Bobby the seclusion that he desired. He wanted to be like right off the beaten track. He knew as soon as he drove into McCarthy in January of 2002 that this was where he wanted to settle down with his kids and his wife. He didn't plan to live in the town itself, but he wanted to live near enough to the small town to get supplies. So he would get supplies weekly by mail plane. Neil Darish, who was in the process of remodeling the McCarthy Lodge for the summer tourism season, was the first to notice the strange arrival of this family. The temperature hovered at 20 degrees below zero, but most of the children, they were just huddled together in the open beds of two pickup trucks. So they're sitting in the back, like they're not dressed for Alaska. They're just huddling together to try and stay warm. When the truck stopped in front of the lodge, the kids, they all jumped off the truck and they were looking around excitedly. They were like, yeah, we're gonna live here, this is great. So a man with long grey hair, a long beard and piercing blue eyes climbed from the cab of one of the trucks, and he introduced himself to Darish as Pilgrim. Darish invited the family into the lodge's dining room. Bobby had come to McCarthy with only 10 of his kids because Rose actually stayed back with the younger children while Bobby was, checking the place out, scouting out available property. So once he'd found something, that the rest of the family would come and join them. So he liked what he saw, and the Pilgrim clan charmed the few residents who'd gathered at the lodge to meet them. The kids, they grabbed fiddles, guitars, and a mandolin from their truck and put on a sort of concert for this gathering crowd of locals. The children were cute, shy, and really religious. Most of the residents welcomed this family, but some of the townspeople, they saw him, Papa Pilgrim, for the con man that he was. They weren't sure about him. They liked the kids, but they weren't sure about him. Bobby soon returned to McCarthy with his wife and the remainder of his children. So he went and got them, brought them back. They bought an abandoned mine 14 miles from McCarthy up a mountain, and accessibility was only through an impassable McCarthy Green Butte Road, and Bobby called their new home Hillbilly Haven. Oh, not Haven, Heaven. Hillbilly Heaven. So Hillbilly Heaven could be reached by snow machine, horse, and even on foot if you didn't mind hiking for a day. So super difficult for anyone to get there quickly if they needed to. Since it was impossible to drive a truck up the road, Bobby arranged to have supplies delivered by bush plane or by horse, or sometimes he would take one of the snowmobiles that they had. I think they had 3. So if this isn't isolation, seclusion, I don't know what is. He is getting his family away from prying eyes. Soon, though, the freight costs became too expensive. And in the fall of 2002, when the family ran short of money, they began to secretly use a bulldozer to clear the old road to town, which they weren't allowed to do. Since the road ran through Wrangell Street, Elias National Park, and park regulations prohibited clearing parkland or altering the old road, Bobby did his best to hide his illicit actions from park services. But the following spring, when the park rangers discovered what he had done to the road, they began surveying the damage and prepared a lawsuit against Bobby. Bobby wasted no time preying on the generosity of other Alaskans and asking for their sympathy and support. It's like, woe me, they're telling me off for trying to get a road. He posted letters around McCarthy about the unfairness of the park service, denying his family access to their home, and he invited a TV news crew to film so its viewers could see the family's simple lifestyle, and so Bobby could talk about how much they needed the old road to haul the supplies to their home, hillbilly heaven. But the thing is, you're not allowed to rip up parkland, so you chose to live all that way out. Like, you can't have a road. Take a horse, go by snowmobile. You gotta do what you gotta do the right thing. But he wouldn't. The charming news piece, it actually generated support for him and anger against park service. This story about the family and their simple godly lifestyle high above McCarthy in hillbilly heaven spread to national and even international news. Like, we saw it here in New Zealand at the arse end of the world. We heard about it. The Washington Post, The Economist, CNN, and the BBC all did stories on this family and their backwards lifestyle. Then, reporters uncovered the story of Bobby's past, but he pushed his charming children in the front of the cameras and never missed an opportunity for his family to perform their gospel tunes for the press, so no one really cared too much about his criminal history. Then the residents of McCarthy, who at first had found the family charming and welcomed them with open arms, soon began to grow tired of the clan. At the beginning of 2004, summer tourist season, Bobby dressed some of his younger children, in ragged outfits and stationed them by the footbridge into McCarthy, where they sold tickets for a bus ride up to the Kennecott mines. So other local families, they were actually already providing a bus service to the mines, and the residents, they were annoyed that this family was stealing their business. So, because it's hard to make money, especially in a place like this, and this was their thing. And then this guy comes along and is like putting his little kids out to sell tickets. Anyway, the family also set up a squatters camp that was down the street from the McCarthy Lodge, where they would stay when they went into town. So they're squatters in the town. They even brought their livestock. Yeah, they brought their livestock into their camp, and it forced their neighbors to deal with horrible smells of, poop from the animals and just bad smells all around. McCarthy residents repeatedly asked Bobby to move their squatters camp, but he just refused. He's like, no, I'm not doing that. So Stevens Harper, a park ranger and a neighbor whose driveway had been partially blocked by the family's possessions, approached their camp. And he approached their camp in a bulldozer. So he's not taking any shit. He's going to go in, he's going to make the move. 24 McCarthy residents arrived on the scene to support this guy, and Papa Pilgrim finally moved the camp to a parcel of land he'd recently purchased at the end of McCarthy Road. I don't know why he didn't just go there in the beginning, but He continued to teach his kids that it was okay for them to steal equipment and animals from others, and if the father had a run-in with one of the locals, he just sent his 2 oldest sons to intimidate them, to follow them around, make them scared. When park service rangers attempted to climb the road to talk to Bobby, some of the older kids started following the rangers. They were on horseback, and then they blocked their way when they got close enough to hillbilly heaven. Papa Pilgrim, he was horrible. He was horrible. He liked to preach his version of the gospel, and when others disagreed with him, he'd just get real shitty at them, and then he'd just leave. Yeah. The people of McCarthy found him overbearing and self-righteous, and they were concerned about the welfare of his kids, because they're not getting treated well. Bathing 3 to 4 days, Come on. The older kids often had big bruises. People were noticing that these kids were usually covered in bruises. They thought maybe it was because of their rough lifestyle, being outside a lot, or maybe the source was more sinister. They started thinking that maybe their dad was hurting them. A few realized that most of the kids couldn't read, and they wondered if the children had ever actually got formal schooling. Although the residents worried about the kids, most felt that it was not their place to interfere in the lives of this family, who seemed well adjusted and happy enough. So no one could know the horrors that Rose and her children were enduring at the hands of Papa Pilgrim. Bobby is a sick man, a very sick man. I'm about to start talking about incest. So, yeah. Bobby, disgusting. And he began sexual relations with his oldest daughter when she was 18 years old. 10 years later, she, her father, and her mother often shared the same bed. Bobby told his daughter that her mum was old and ugly and that Rose no longer excited him. He told her that she needed to get him excited so that he could plant his seed in her mum. He is disgusting, shit, gross. His poor daughter, she had to have sex with her dad. She hated it. She hated this. She knew it wasn't right. But when she told her father she thought their relationship was sinful, Bobby told her the scripture said it was okay for a father to have sex with his oldest daughter. She doesn't know any better. So horrible. He also pointed out that she was helping her mum have more kids. Her mum doesn't need to have more kids. In 2004, the family met another devout Christian family who lived in Palmer, Alaska. These were the Buckinghams. They had 9 kids, and the Pilgrim children were really happy and excited to meet these new potential friends. At first, even Papa Pilgrim liked this family, but then Jim Buckingham, the father, noticed the many bruises that were on the oldest daughter, and he suspected that her dad was physically and sexually abusing her. He was right. When Buckingham confronted Bobby about his suspicions, Bobby got really angry, and he basically, said to his family, "We're out of here. We're leaving. Don't want to hang out with these people anymore." While with the Buckinghams, Bobby's oldest daughter actually told the daughters, the other, the Buckingham girls, that the Bible discouraged marriage. The girls who knew the Bible well explained to her that she was mistaken. She began to wonder if maybe her father had misquoted the Bible on purpose, and she began to question everything that her dad had taught her and her siblings. She mostly wondered if the Bible said that it was right for a father and daughter to have sexual relations. She wanted to know if the Bible actually says that, or if it's just something that her dad's making up. Bobby seemed to be losing control of his temper more and more often. He was getting really irate and angry, and he's taking it out on his kids. When their youngest child cried, he was only an infant, Bobby set the baby on his lap, and he would pinch his nose and mouth closed until the baby turned blue and would pass out. Absolutely horrible. That can do so much damage to a child's brain, honestly. This action not only scared the baby, but also terrified Rose and the other kids. So Bobby began to pinch this baby's nose and mouth often, just to keep everybody else in line. He's disgusting. I know everyone's like, why isn't Rose doing something? I don't know. In January 2005, Bobby took his oldest daughter and some of the boys down to McCarthy to gather supplies, and they stayed at their shack on the edge of town. That night, Bobby and his sons, they had an argument about something Jim Buckingham had told them, and he sent his boys out to unload the trucks, and then he took his temper out on his daughter. So his daughter, she actually said to him at this stage that he'd been teaching him wrong, and that the Bible doesn't say what he's been saying. And he lashed out at his daughter even more. He took off his belt and he began to whip her. When the boys heard their sister screaming, because they loved their sister, they ran back to the shack. Their sister tried to run out the door, but Bobby grabbed her. He grabbed her by her hair and he dragged her back inside. And he told his sons that they had to leave. So they got on one of the snow machines and they headed back up to their house. Bobby then, alone with his daughter, he went on to beat her savagely, and he R-worded her viciously and repeatedly. He kept her locked in this shack for 3 days, and when he finally let her out and took her home, he made her wear a ski mask so that the family couldn't see her bruises and her badly swollen face. Her 16-year-old sister actually asked her if she could remove the ski mask so that she could see what her dad had done to her sister. So she did. She took the ski mask off and she saw that her sister, her face was just so beaten and swollen. She barely recognized her. Her brothers, they were so shocked and they were so angry when they saw their sister's face, and they told their dad that what he was doing was wrong. The older sister told her brothers what Bobby had actually been doing to her, like everything, but she didn't say about the sexual abuse. She kept that out, but the beatings and everything else. And she said that he treated her like a wife, only 100 times worse, and it was as bad as they could imagine. The older boys, they confronted their dad, and Bobby lashed out and hit one of his sons in the nose and broke it with his fist. The 4 older boys, they decided that they'd had enough. This was getting too much. This man is horrible, and they decided that they were going to leave. So they told their sisters, and they said that they should come too. After the boys left, Bobby declared his sons lost to the devil, and his behavior grew even more erratic as he continued to beat his daughters, and he would punish the younger kids for small wrongdoings. Rose actually told her oldest daughter to run away from home, but she was so scared. She was terrified of her father and what would happen if he caught her. Finally, one day when the gasoline supply for the generator was running low, Bobby decided that he was going to make a quick trip to McCarthy to get some more gas. And his daughter, she knew that this was her chance to break free and make a run for it. She told the others that she was leaving, and her 16-year-old sister said that she would go with her. Her sister was really worried that she didn't have the will to keep herself alive, so she wanted to go along and take care of her older sister. Rose rang her oldest son, and he said that he and the other boys would meet the girls when they arrived in McCarthy, and that they would keep the girls safe from their dad. So Rose, she wants her children to be safe. She's just so scared. I'm not going to make excuses, and I'm also not going to have an opinion on Rose. I'm leaving that. I'm Switzerland on Rose. The girls knew they didn't have much time to leave because Bobby planned to hurry to McCarthy, grab the gas, and rush back, because he was scared that his daughter would escape and go and tell authorities what he'd been doing. The 2 young women attempted to start one of the snow machines, but it wouldn't fire. And when they looked at the engine, they actually realized that the spark plug had been removed. They reckon that Bobby was trying hard to keep his family trapped, so he moved it. But they just replaced the spark plug, and they said goodbye to their family, and they drove a short distance over the snow. Annoyingly, the fan belt broke. So one of the girls, she ran up through the deep snow back to the cabin to start up a second machine, because they have a few machines. So she went and got it. They only went a short distance on this snow machine though, because it ran out of gas, and they saw that it had a leak in the fuel line. So tensions are high at this stage. They've tried 2 different machines to try and get out of there. They were frantically trying to get away from this horrible man. They were running out of time and options. Like, Bobby was going to return soon. And in desperation, they started a third snow machine. And it worked. They travelled a short distance and then pulled off the main trail, and they hid the machine in the trees, and they hid in the trees. They had brought white sheets with them so that they could cover themselves and the snow machine with these sheets, and they remained motionless in the snow. So it's kind of like, you know, camouflage, white sheets, looks like snow, that kind of thing. So they're hiding. And it's smart. It's really smart. So the girls, they couldn't even imagine the magnitude of Bobby's rage if he found them. Like, they're hiding in the snow. They're trying to get to town. And they know Bobby's going to come back up that hill any moment now. What would happen if he found them? If he saw that it was a sheet and not snow? They actually heard Bobby's snow machine coming up the trail. The girls, they kept so still, and they were praying, and they tried to remain calm. He drove past them, and he didn't see them. That's when they knew they had to hurry. It was now or never. They had half an hour at best before Bobby would be on their trail, because he was almost home. He would see that, you know, they tried to start these other machines, that they were gone, and you'd be looking for them. So they arrived into McCarthy, but their brothers weren't at the meeting place. They were freaking out. Where are their brothers? The girls pulled the snow machine into thick brush, and they hid under a tree and waited for their brothers. Then they heard Bobby. Bobby had come down in his snow machine. He was looking for them. The girls were terrified. They were so scared that he was going to find them. Bobby was searching the streets of the town. He was circling and waiting for any sign of his missing daughters. He stayed down there for ages, like a couple of days, looking for them. So they're still hiding. The girls, they were so scared, and they stayed under that tree for 5 days. They were eating cold cheese and raisins. The temperature had dropped to 20 degrees below zero at night. How are they still alive? They didn't dare build a fire because they knew that their dads would see it. And they had no sleeping bags. They didn't know that they were going to be stuck, you know, for 5 days. They thought their brothers would be there. They were huddled, waiting, trying to cuddle into each other for warmth. They finally decided now is the time to sneak down to the town shack and use the phone. They knew they had to be really careful and really quiet because their dad could be staying at the cabin. When they arrived at the shack, they quietly searched the surrounding woods to see if, you know, there's any sign that their dad is there. And they actually found that Bobby had hidden his snow machine in the brush. So they knew he was there. The girls, they freaked out and they hurried back to their hiding place. And the next day, they crept out again and entered another cabin and used the phone there to call their brothers. The brothers had actually misunderstood the original spot, and they had anxiously been waiting to hear from their sisters. They were confused where they were supposed to meet. They thought the girls had been caught because they hadn't shown up. The brothers, they went and they rescued their sisters, and the girls eventually went to live with the Buckinghams in Palmer. You know that family? Yeah, they went and lived with them. A few months later, when the oldest daughter heard that Bobby had nearly beaten their 2-year-old brother to death, she knew that it was time to report her father for his sins to the authorities. Bobby got word that the troopers were after him, and he managed to hide from them for 12 days. They eventually found him, and he was put under arrest. He stood quietly while the authorities placed the handcuffs on him. Bobby continued to deny the claims made by his wife and his children, even after a Palmer grand jury charged him in September 2005 with 30 felony accounts of the R-word, assault, and incest. He pleaded not guilty to the charges, but a year later, he changed his plea. So he changed it to no contest in exchange for a 14-year prison sentence. At his sentencing hearing in September of 2007, his wife and all of his kids, except the youngest one, you know, the little baby, well, she was like, or he was like 4 by this stage, they scolded their dad. They asked him, like, to his face, why were you so horrible? Why did you do this to us? Why did you do so many terrible things to your family? You're supposed to love your family. They told the judge that they loved their dad, and they were trying not to hold bitterness against him, but they begged this judge not to let their dad out of prison. They were terrified that if he ever got out, that he would come after them, because, you know, they're the reason that he's there. They were scared. They love him, but it's like a love-hate thing, you know? They love him, but they hate him. As 14 of his 15 children spoke at the sentencing hearing, spectators cringed when they heard for the first time the depths of horror the family had endured at the hands of their own father and husband, because Rose got put through crap as well. The oldest daughter's statement, when she detailed some of her father's most appalling acts towards her, sickened the crowd. The children confessed that they thought their world was normal until they met the Buckinghams and realized that maybe there's another way to live. So Bobby's in prison, and he is sick, and he passed away. So Bobby died in prison. Yeah, he died in the prison hospital on May the 26th, 2008, only 8 months into his sentence. He was 67 years old, and he had poor health for quite some time. He never apologized to his family for what he'd put them through, and in the end, he actually refused to talk to his family. But who gives a shit? Like, honestly, why would you want to talk to him? Most of the kids, they moved into the Buckingham's place, where they learned to read and write. So this family took them in, like, embraced them, like, really looked after them. 2 of the older brothers actually married the 2 oldest Buckingham daughters, and the oldest daughter is also now married. How do you erase a lifetime of abuse and a childhood where your parents taught you to survive in the wilderness but offered you no advice about how to belong in society and how to treat others? How? They're doing it though, right? They're out there, they're living. Hopefully with much support, these children, now adults, will find their way. The residents of McCarthy, who had initially found the children sweet and the family charming, were horrified when they learned what was actually happening to these kids. It's horrible. Yeah. So yeah, that's the story for today. I read a lot about some of the kids. Some of the kids have made statements. They've had interviews and stuff like that. So from what I have read, the kids are doing okay. Rose is doing okay. That's what I read. And yeah, that's where I'm going to leave this one today. Whew, my goodness. Papa Pilgrim, what a friggin' dick, honestly. Anyway, that's me. I am going to leave it there. Ugh, gross, man. I really hope that older daughter is okay. Yeah. She seemed okay in an interview I watched. But yeah, I hope you guys have a wonderful morning, day, night, whatever it is where you are, and I will be talking to you later. If you have any case suggestions, please let me know in the comment section. Thanks, guys. See you later.